Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rome.
In our top story, U.S. President Joe Biden has promised $100 million in aid to Gaza and has reportedly pressured Israel to hold off on its impending ground invasion. The New York Times has reported that the White House has asked Israel to wait to put boots on the ground in the Hamas stronghold while it attempts to negotiate for the release of the hostages. So far, 4 of the 222 hostages have been released. Judith Ra'anan and her 17-year-old daughter Natalie, as well as 2 elderly hostages, Norit Cooper and Yocheved Lifshitz, were freed by Hamas. The terror group continues to refuse to allow medical treatment or the delivery of medications for the remaining hostages. The Biden administration has pushed to restart the flow of supplies into Gaza and to ensure that aid will flow continuously throughout the war. Jerusalem is concerned that the aid will be hijacked by the Hamas terror group, which continues to fire rockets into Israel.
The Mossad and Israel's internal security service, the Shin Bet, have formed a special task force to track down and eliminate the Hamas terrorist who perpetrated the October 7th genocide. The team is called Nili and was named after a World War I-era Jewish underground organization. Its mission is to hunt down all of the members of the Nakba terror cell that slaughtered more than 1,400 people and orchestrated the abduction of at least 222 people on that fateful day. Several of these terrorists have already been killed in targeted Israeli airstrikes in the Gaza Strip.
The Israeli Defense Forces Maglan unit has initiated the use of the Iron Sting system to combat Hamas rockets fired from Gaza. This revolutionary defense technology, developed by Israel's Elbit Systems, uses GPS and laser guidance to precisely target the source of rocket fire. Elbit says that this cutting-edge technology will revolutionize ground warfare by equipping battalions with organic, accurate, and effective firepower. The Iron Sting uses 120-millimeter mortars to strike positions at a distance of between 1 to 12 kilometers and can penetrate double reinforced concrete. Colonel Omer Cohen, the commander of Maglan, said that his elite commando unit, in cooperation with the Israeli Air Force, has successfully eliminated dozens of terrorists since the onset of the war with a variety of means, including the new Iron Sting weapon.
Dozens of German police officers have been injured in ongoing pro-Palestinian protests throughout the country. According to reports, Arab communities in Berlin were called to turn the city into Gaza and burn everything. A synagogue was firebombed and several people were injured in the ensuing violence. A spokesperson for the Berlin Police Department said at least 65 officers were wounded by stones, flammable liquids, and brutal acts of resistance. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz moved to ban the violent anti-Israel protest. He stressed that gatherings where anti-Semitic slogans are shouted, where the deaths of other human beings are glorified, must be outlawed.
British police have reported a startling rise in anti-Semitic incidents since the Hamas attacks on the Jewish state. The Metropolitan Police, also known as the Met, released a report stating that anti-Jewish offenses have risen by 1,353%. The Met said that despite the increased presence of police officers, there has been a significant rise in hate crimes throughout London. The British government has announced a zero-tolerance policy for anti-Semitism or the glorification of terror and has allocated an additional £3 million to increase security at Jewish institutions throughout the country.
Israel's internal security agency, the Shin Bet, has disclosed selected clips of interrogations of several Hamas terrorists who infiltrated Israel on October 7th. The videotaped confessions reveal that the terrorists were promised $10,000 and an apartment if they succeeded in bringing hostages back into Gaza. The interviews also disclosed that Hamas commanders, who themselves stayed in hiding in Gaza, instructed their fighters to kill, behead, and rape civilians. The terror leaders also provided the terrorists with narcotics to complete their evil task. Dozens of Hamas terrorists were found in possession of a synthetic amphetamine-type stimulant called Captagon, which is the same drug used by ISIS terrorists. Israel's Channel 12 television reported that the drug was discovered on many of the terrorists' bodies. It works as an appetite suppressant, provides increased energy, and enables the murderers to stay awake for long periods of time.
The Israeli Defense Forces thwarted a major attack being planned from a mosque in the Arab city of Jenin in northern Samaria. According to the Israeli Defense Forces and Shin Bet, terrorists affiliated with Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad constructed an underground terror route and were stockpiling weapons underneath the Al-Ansari Mosque. The Islamic house of worship was being used as a staging ground for planned attacks and as a base for the terror cells. IDF spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said the group was a ticking time bomb, planning an imminent murderous attack on Jews in Judea and Samaria, and that the IDF struck the mosque to prevent another heinous attack on Israelis.
The Israel Law Center Shurat Hadin has filed a claim in the International Criminal Court at The Hague, urging the chief prosecutor to pursue a criminal investigation against the Hamas and Islamic Jihad terror groups. The organization requested that the ICC issue international arrest warrants for leaders of the terror groups for their part in planning and executing the massacre of more than 1,400 people in Israel, most of whom were civilians. Shurat Hadin accused Hamas of war crimes and crimes against humanity during the October 7th massacre. Nitzana Darshan Leitner, the founder and president of Shurat Hadin, said the ICC itself bears responsibility for the carnage in Israel. She stressed that from the beginning, the ICC has acted with prejudice and bias against the Jewish state. She revealed that since 2014, her organization has filed numerous petitions against the terror groups. The ICC prosecutor reportedly ignored all of these complaints, while ICC members continued to meet with pro-Palestinian organizations and even Palestinian leaders who were the subjects of the criminal complaints.
U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has ordered the activation of America's Patriot missile shields and its terminal high-altitude area defense batteries throughout the Middle East in response to increasing threats from Iran. The Pentagon ordered the U.S. military to bolster its readiness throughout the region in response to what it called recent escalations by Iran and its proxy forces. It added that the United States would take appropriate action to prevent these actors from attempting to open a new war front in the Middle East. Austin said that these measures will bolster regional deterrence efforts, increasing protection of U.S. forces in the region, and assist in the defense of Israel.
1 in 5 rockets fired by Arab terror groups misfires, killing people in Gaza. Recently, a faulty rocket fired by a Palestinian terror group struck a hospital parking lot, killing Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Immediately, the world blamed Israel for the carnage, but overwhelming evidence has been presented proving that the missile was launched by terrorists from within Gaza. The IDF said terror groups are killing their own people with missiles meant for Israel. It added that 20% of the rockets fired have fallen within the territory of Gaza, endangering civilians in the densely populated area.
Mossab Hassan Youssef, son of terror leader Sheikh Hassan Youssef, warned Americans that Hamas is much worse than ISIS. Youssef, known as the son of Hamas, told Fox News that the terror group is a raging religious movement operating against Israel. He said that the mainstream media has been hesitant to call Hamas a genocidal Islamic movement for fear of igniting a full-on religious war, but Youssef said that war has already begun.
Israelis, and in particular IDF soldiers, are becoming more religiously observant since the onset of the war. According to the military rabbinate, there has been a high demand for religious articles, including tzitzit. The book of Numbers, chapter 15, verse 37, commands Jews to wear fringes known as tzitzit on the corners of their garments. The IDF rabbinate has been inundated with more than 60,000 requests for tzitzit, so it taught hundreds of volunteers how to tie the fringed garments for the soldiers on the front lines. There's also been a huge increase in Haredi enlistment to the IDF. This ultra-Orthodox community traditionally serves the country in other ways, but the war has inspired more than 2,000 Haredi volunteers to join the Israeli army.
A bipartisan delegation of U.S. senators visited the Jewish state last week to show support for Israel. The group of 5 Republican and 5 Democratic lawmakers met with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman ahead of visiting the Jewish state and said that Iran instructed Hamas to attack Israel in order to sabotage the impending Saudi-Israeli peace accords. The group called for unity in the Middle East against the common enemy of Iran and urged the Gulf state to move forward with the normalization agreement. Lindsey Graham said that 10% of the U.S. Senate had come to Israel because they care about the Jewish state. He said that destroying Hamas is non-negotiable and that if the conflict grows, it will spread to the Ayatollah's backyard. He said that if the hostages are slaughtered, he will hold Iran accountable because Tehran could stop it if it chose to.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned now for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is member of Knesset, Dan Illouz. Dan, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Dan, tell our viewers a little about what's happening with the war today.
I mean, we remember that on October 7th, Israel was brutally attacked by one of the most evil regimes that history has known, a regime that's comparable only to the Nazis or to ISIS and those types of regimes. And right now, Israel is getting ready. It's attacking from the skies through the Air Force, but it's also getting ready for ground invasion in order to completely eliminate Hamas. Those types of evil regimes should not be on the face of this earth, and that's what we're going to do here in Israel.
We heard from the Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, that there's a 3-point plan. Can you talk about that a little bit?
The 3-point plan is basically similar to what I said, the goal being that Hamas does not exist anymore in Gaza after we finish with this operation, with this war. And so we're first going to take over the Gaza Strip. That's what Gallant has said publicly. And afterwards, we also expect that after this happens, there will still be some opposition, which we will need to take care of. And so there will be some type of interim period, which afterwards will look for a long-term program, which isn't defined yet. We don't know yet what it will be. What is important for us right now is that people who did the atrocious things that were done on October 7th, such as burning babies alive, raping women, abducting the elderly without their medication, these people cannot rule in Gaza anymore. These people have to be eradicated, and that's what we're focused on right now.
We're seeing a lot of attacks in the north. Almost every day a soldier is killed. Why haven't we hit back harder?
Hezbollah is a threat to Israel in the north, as you said, and Hezbollah needs to be taken care of also. However, we're focused on Gaza right now in order to make it clear that people who attack Israel cannot survive in the atrocious way that was done. Again, it's an evil regime that has no right to exist on this earth, so they cannot survive. We want to give this clear message. Afterwards, we'll need to take care of Hezbollah in the north and even of Iran, which is also behind the scenes running a lot of these attacks. We will need to take care of these challenges, but right now we're laser focused on ensuring that Hamas does not survive the horrendous attacks that it did on October 7th.
We heard some beautiful words from the Biden administration, from President Biden himself, but there's also a lot of speculation that he's handcuffing us, that he's not allowing us to fight back on the northern border. He doesn't want this to escalate. How much does that come into factor with Israeli policy?
Listen, Israel appreciates American support. We appreciate the support from Biden. We appreciate the support also from both sides of the aisle. We know that Americans stand with Israel, and we're very grateful about that. However, Israel will do always what is necessary in order to secure itself, in order to defend itself. That's always been true. That's also true right now. So while we appreciate the support and we hope it continues, we'll always do what Israel needs to do.
We heard from Secretary of State Blinken that there's no direct line to Iran on these attacks, but obviously everyone knows that Iran is the state sponsor with weapons, money, training of Hamas and Hezbollah. Why is there no call to take on Iran?
As I said in a few minutes ago in what I said, Iran will also need to be taken care of. I mean, I think one of the things that we saw, Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas, they all have the same extremist Islamist ideology, the same Nazi ideology of killing babies, of raping women. That's the same ideology. Imagine if they had nuclear weapons. We saw what a small terrorist group like Hamas did. Imagine if you gave Iran a nuclear weapon with that horrible ideology. That's what we're facing, and that's what we're going to have to take care of eventually. Right now, we're laser focused on Hamas in order to give a clear message that you cannot massacre Jews without proper response, but we'll need to take care of Iran also.
We're seeing that people are saying, why aren't we hitting Hamas harder? Why isn't there more of a bombardment? Why didn't you turn Gaza into a parking lot? Why is there a sense that we're pulling back a little bit, or are we hitting with everything we got?
First of all, we're hitting very hard. Only in the first few days in Gaza, in the operation after the massacre, there were more bombs on Gaza than there was in a whole year in Afghanistan. That's just in order to show you the amount of force. We've already used much more force than in any of the previous operations. But I also want to promise you, Josh, the people who did what they did, Hamas, will regret the day that they did this massacre. They will regret it. They're already starting to regret it. They will regret it. And after this military operation, after this war, I promise you they'll regret it deeply.
A lot of the leadership of Hamas is in Qatar. Some are in Turkey. Why are they able to operate with impunity in those areas?
Who said they're able to operate with impunity? If I was them, I would be afraid.
We see that a lot of fighting is going on in the north, as I mentioned. What's our red line there? At what point do we say enough is enough and take on Hezbollah, even if it's at the risk of diverting troops from Gaza?
The only thing that will define whether we go into Lebanon or not is the Israeli interest. We're going to decide when we'll do it. We're obviously going to have to take care of Hezbollah, but the exact timing and how we do it is going to be based on the interest of the Israeli people and the Israeli security, and not anything else.
Dan, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
What I'd like to say is that this war isn't just about Israel. This is a war between civilizations, between a Nazi-like regime that hates, that is full of hatred, an extreme Islamist regime, and between the free world. Israel right now is on the front lines. We're fighting for ourselves, but we're also fighting for you. So we hope that you keep standing with us.
Thank you, Dan, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, the truth from Zion.
The Abraham Accords are a diplomatic success that seemed completely unimaginable until they were actually signed.
Today's signing sets history on a new course.
In 1979, Egypt and Israel signed the Camp David Accords, which was the first normalization agreement between the Jewish state and an Arab nation, but it did not come without pain. Just 6 years earlier, the two nations were at war. In 1994, Jordan became the second country to normalize relations with Israel. The Abraham Accords offered a remarkable departure from decades of regional tensions and conflicts. Powerful Arab nations recognized Israel and agreed to work together as partners for innovation and regional stability after years of holding out for a resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to come first. In September 2020, this historic event captured the world's attention.
The Middle East has made a significant step towards peace. President Trump declared the pact the dawn of a new Middle East.
The momentous agreement facilitated the normalization of diplomatic relations between Israel and two Arab nations, the United Arab Emirates, known as the UAE, and Bahrain. The groundbreaking agreement has paved the way for new alliances and cooperation in the Middle East. After these powerhouse nations made it official, Morocco joined the accords and Sudan followed soon afterwards. Economic and cultural exchanges continue to expand with all four countries. The document was created by Jared Kushner, senior advisor to then President of the United States Donald Trump, and Avi Berkowitz, the special representative for international negotiations. They represented the United States government's efforts to foster peace and normalization between Israel and the moderate Arab nations. bringing to the surface negotiations that had been under wraps for a long time with the UAE and Bahrain. It was a huge deal because 26 years had gone by since any Arab nation had penned a peace agreement with Israel.
The Abraham Accords are important because they overturned all assumptions about peacemaking in the Middle East. The assumptions were Israel had to withdraw to the 1967 borders, we had to uproot tens of thousands of Israeli citizens from their communities, that we had to redivide Jerusalem and create a Palestinian state in order to get an agreement with any other Arab countries. And the answer to all that is no, 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 no. And moreover, we also got real peace. We got peace with the peoples, and then we got peace with the governments. And any future agreement between Israel and an Arab country will look like the Abraham Accords. We in Israel have to pursue it also intelligently and sensitively, because in some of these countries, the issue of making peace with Israel is still very, very sensitive, but I believe we'll be able to overcome those obstacles.
The Abraham Accords were also a departure from the failed idea of land for peace. These are true peace deals that offer peace for peace. These countries are concerned about Iran's regime of terror.
Iran's aggressive actions in the Middle East played a significant role in motivating Arab countries to sign these agreements. Prior to the 1979 revolution, Israel and Iran enjoyed a strong alliance and a positive relationship. And when they will be free from the Ayatollah regime, the Abraham Accords led by Prime Minister Netanyahu shows what could be accomplished with Iran as well.
The UAE and Israel are also working together on a number of projects creating opportunities for business and cultural cooperation. Soon after the accords were signed, Israelis were allowed to travel to the UAE through direct flights and simplified visa procedures. Previously, such travel had been constrained due to a lack of formal diplomatic relations. However, with the accords in place, commercial airlines began to offer direct flights between Tel Aviv and Dubai. When the accords were signed, experts projected Israelis, Bahrainis, and Emiratis would create about $500 million of business. Those numbers have been greatly exceeded. The deals range from trade and investment agreements to joint research initiatives and even vibrant cultural exchanges. Since the signing, 1 million Israelis have gone to the UAE for tourism and business. Many say the changes come from the ground up. Emiratis share warm feelings toward Israelis with messages of support online and even make kosher food available in supermarkets. The Abraham Accords have done more than just establish diplomatic ties. They have ignited conversations about peace and collaboration throughout the region. The momentum generated by this agreement has sparked a broader dialogue on the potential for unity in a historically divided region. Saudi Arabia and other countries in the region are rumored to be close to joining the agreement as well. And now, shining light from Israel.
Located just a half-hour north of the city of Eilat lies one of the most majestic parks in the entire land of Israel, Timna. Walking through Timna Park is literally walking through time. 500 million years of geological evolution. All of this area at one time was covered by a huge deep sea called the Tethys Sea. And further to the east, 500 million years ago, came up these huge, massive granite mountains. But as the Tethys Sea began to dissipate, it carved off the top layer of this limestone mountain. And with the earthquakes, the rains, the ice age, it carved out the valley I'm walking in right now to reveal some of the most beautiful geological formations. So let's go see some of them now. One of the great things about visiting Timna Park is to be able to walk on this timeless landscape. Underneath all of these rocks you see behind me is sand just like this. And it makes me wonder, after another million years of erosion, what formations will be revealed? The natural beauty here in Timna is just one aspect of the park. But when ancient man arrives here, they'll find something of value within its stones. As you walk about, you'll notice these beautiful green stones everywhere. This is copper ore, and it was during the Chalcolithic period here in Timna that the Copper Age began. One of the ways ancient man would mine the copper here at Timna would be to dig out these vertical shafts until they found a vein of copper ore like you can see right here. And then once discovering that vein, they would start to dig horizontally, digging out all of that ore and bringing it to the top. So in all of these shafts, you'll have channels from the left to the right, all following ores of copper. And as a visitor to Timna, one can explore these shafts on their own. Okay, now that we learned how they mined the copper ore, let's now learn how they smelted it. Once the copper ore was mined and brought here in baskets, they would use these tools over here to grind the rocks to a fine powder. That fine powder would then be brought here to the oven, which was fueled with acacia wood, a biblical tree that grows in this area. Using manpower and these bellows, they would pump air into the oven, and the temperatures would rise to at least 1,000 degrees Celsius when the copper would melt. Copper, being heavy, would sink to the bottom of the oven, where the slag, the refuse, would slide out from a hole that was drilled into the side of the oven. Once it cooled off, what remained were these huge copper patties known as an ingot, and then they would melt it down, pour the copper into the mold, making a beautiful bar, creating an easy way to transport all of their copper. The Egyptian Empire will fall in the 13th century BCE, and the Edomians, who were already mining copper in what is today southern Jordan, began to mine copper here as well. King Solomon in the 9th century BCE will also establish mines here. These mines would be known as Solomon's Mines. In fact, the pillars, the beautiful formations you can see behind me, are named after King Solomon. Timna Park offers many ways to experience it, from hiking and biking trails to Jeep tours, as well as a multimedia presentation that tells the story of the park. There's also a fantastic visitor center with a full-service restaurant and overnight accommodations. So on your next visit to Israel, make sure to visit Timna Park.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El-Rom, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.